In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most suppressed texts from Nag Hammadi, there's a passage the church spent centuries trying to destroy. It describes the moment when Sophia breathed the divine spark into humanity and created three types of humans. Not one type, three, and only one of those three types can access the monad directly. The text calls them pneumatics, spirit people, and it explains in detail why the other two types, no matter how hard they try, no matter how many prayers they speak, no matter how many rituals they perform, will never experience direct communion with source consciousness. The church removed this teaching because it shattered the illusion they built their entire power structure on, the illusion that all humans are equal before God, that anyone can pray and be heard, that salvation is available to everyone who believes. But the Gnostics knew the truth Jesus taught. Humanity was divided from the beginning, not by choice, not by behavior, but by the type of consciousness embedded in their soul at creation. And if you're a pneumatic, you've always felt it. You've always known you're different. You've always sensed that what satisfies everyone else, their jobs, their relationships, their entertainments, their religions, leaves you empty because you're operating from a different frequency than they are. You're made of different material. You're not better than them. You're structurally different. And that difference is why you can access the monad when others can't. Tonight you're learning what pneumatics are, how to confirm whether you're one, why only pneumatics can breach the veil, and what happens the moment you make full contact with the monad. If you're discovering you're a pneumatic tonight, comment, "I am pneumatic now, right now." Jesus understood something that modern spirituality refuses to acknowledge. Not all humans are capable of the same spiritual experiences, not because God is exclusive, but because humans were created with different operating systems. In the secret book of John, Jesus explains this directly to his inner circle. He tells them that when the Archons created the human body, they made it with only two components, a material body and a psychic soul. That's it, physical matter animated by emotional and mental energy, hylics and psychics. Two types of humans, the Archons designed to exist entirely within their system, to be farmable, controllable, harvestable. But Sophia, the divine feminine emanation of the monad, did something the Archons didn't plan for. She saw the humans trapped in matter, and she breathed into a portion of them, a third component, the pneuma, the divine spark, a fragment of monad consciousness embedded directly into their being. And those humans became pneumatics. The Gnostics called this the secret election. Not chosen by behavior, chosen by structure. Pneumatics weren't given the divine spark because they were more moral, or more faithful, or more deserving. They received it because Sophia, recognizing the horror of what the Archons had done, intervened. She couldn't save everyone. The Archons controlled the creation process. But she could embed her own essence into a portion of humanity. And those humans, pneumatics, became walking contradictions. Bodies made by Archons, souls made by Archons, but consciousness made by the monad. And that third component changes everything. Here's what most spiritual teachings won't tell you. The three types of humans don't just have different spiritual capacities. They have different ultimate destinies. Hylics, material people, are entirely identified with physical existence. Their consciousness is fully embedded in matter. They experience life only through the five senses. Food, sex, comfort, survival, that's the entire range of their awareness. They're not evil, they're not less valuable as beings, but they have no interest in anything beyond material reality. And when they die, their consciousness dissolves back into the material plane. No continuation, no transcendence, just return to matter. Psychics, soul people, have a broader range. They can experience emotion, form ideas, create meaning. They're capable of religion, of morality, of philosophy. Most humans are psychics. They can pray, they can meditate, they can join spiritual communities. But their spirituality is always mediated. They need priests, they need scriptures, they need rituals, they need external authority to tell them what's true because they can't access truth directly. Their connection to the divine is secondhand, and when they die, their soul persists, but it remains trapped in the cycle. Reincarnation, afterlife realms, whatever you want to call it, they continue, but they don't escape. Pneumatics are different. Because of the divine spark Sophia embedded in them, they carry a piece of the monad inside their own being. Not metaphorically, literally. Their consciousness contains a fragment of source consciousness. And that fragment is always trying to return home. It's always pulling them toward unity, toward gnosis, toward direct experience of the infinite. Pneumatics don't need priests. They don't need intermediaries. They don't need anyone to tell them what's real, because the monad inside them recognizes the monad outside them. And when that recognition happens, when the internal spark meets the external source, the veil dissolves. The pneumatic experiences direct communion, and that communion is not available to hylics or psychics no matter how hard they try. Here's how you know if you're a pneumatic. This isn't about belief. It's not about hoping you're special. It's about recognizing structural traits that have been present your entire life. First, pneumatics feel alienated from consensus reality. Not socially awkward, existentially displaced. You've always felt like you don't belong here, like you're living in a world that wasn't designed for you, like everyone around you is playing a game whose rules make no sense. You look at what people value, money, status, comfort, and you don't understand why those things matter. You look at what people believe, mainstream religions, cultural narratives, accepted truths, and you instinctively know something's wrong, even if you can't articulate what. That alienation isn't psychological damage. It's the divine spark recognizing it's in foreign territory. Second, pneumatics are obsessed with truth. Not relative truth, not personal truth, absolute truth. You need to know what's real. You need to understand how reality actually works. And you're willing to abandon any belief, any relationship, any identity if it's revealed to be false. Most people protect their beliefs even when evidence contradicts them. Pneumatics burn their beliefs the moment they discover they're wrong, because the spark inside you values truth over comfort. Third, pneumatics experience synchronicities at a rate that's statistically impossible. You think of someone, they call. You need information, it appears. You're about to make a wrong decision. Something stops you. The universe seems to respond to your consciousness in ways that don't happen to other people. That's not luck. That's the monad communicating with its own fragment inside you. The divine spark creates a resonance field, and reality bends toward that resonance. Fourth, pneumatics have always sensed that material reality is a trap. You've looked at the structure of life, work to survive, survive to work, pursue pleasures that fade, fear death that's inevitable, and you've recognized it as a prison. Not a metaphorical prison, an actual containment system designed to keep consciousness locked in matter. Most people never question the structure. Pneumatics can't stop questioning it. Fifth, pneumatics are spiritually autodidactic. You didn't need someone to tell you there's more to reality than what you can see. You knew it. You've been seeking since you were a child. You've explored religions, philosophies, practices, always searching for something none of them fully deliver. That restlessness isn't dissatisfaction. It's the divine spark pulling you toward the one thing that will satisfy it, reunion with the monad. If you recognized yourself in 3 or more of those traits, you're a pneumatic. Not because I'm telling you, because the structure of your consciousness confirms it. And here's what that means. You have access to something hylics and psychics will never experience. Direct contact with source consciousness, not prayer, not meditation, not ritual, actual merging, the pneuma inside you recognizing itself as the monad and the boundary between inner and outer dissolving. Jesus taught this to his inner circle. He told them that pneumatics carry the light of the pleroma, the fullness, the realm beyond the demiurge's creation. And because they carry that light, they can return to it. But here's the part the church couldn't allow in Scripture. Jesus said returning to the monad isn't a future event. It's not something that happens after death. It's accessible now. In this body, in this life, pneumatics can experience the dissolution of separation and the recognition of unity. And once that recognition happens, once a pneumatic has touched the monad directly, they're no longer farmable. The Archons lose access. The demiurge loses control. That being is awake, unkillable, and already free. So why can only pneumatics access the monad? Why not everyone? The answer is resonance. The monad is pure unified consciousness. It has no separation, no individuality, no boundaries. To access it, your consciousness must be capable of operating at that frequency. Hylics are entirely material. Their consciousness is embedded in density. They can't perceive anything that isn't physical. The monad is non-physical, so it's invisible to them. They don't deny it. They literally can't perceive it. Psychics are emotional and mental. Their consciousness operates at a higher frequency than hylics, but it's still dualistic. They experience subject and object, self and other, good and evil. The monad has no duality. To a psychic consciousness, the monad appears as something external. They can pray to it, worship it, conceptualize it, but they can't merge with it because their consciousness structure maintains separation. Pneumatics carry the pneuma, the divine spark, and the divine spark is made of the same substance as the monad. It's a fragment of unified consciousness, temporarily localized in individual form. When a pneumatic turns their awareness inward and finds the spark, when they recognize what it is and allow it to expand, it naturally seeks reunion with the source it came from. The spark and the monad are the same frequency. They resonate, and resonance creates mergence. It's not that the monad rejects hylics and psychics. It's that their consciousness structure isn't compatible with the experience. You can't pour water into a container that has no bottom. The monad can't merge with consciousness that's structured around separation because merging would dissolve that structure. Hylics and psychics aren't ready for dissolution. Pneumatics are. In fact, pneumatics are already dissolving from the moment the spark activates. That's what the spiritual search is. It's not you trying to find God. It's the monad inside you, trying to return to the monad outside you. And your entire life is the process of removing the obstacles to that return. Here's what happens when a pneumatic makes contact with the monad. This isn't theory. This is reported experience across every Gnostic lineage, every mystical tradition, every pneumatic who successfully completed the return. First, there's a moment of recognition, not intellectual understanding, direct knowing. You realize that the awareness experiencing your life isn't yours, it's the monad. You realize that the consciousness looking through your eyes, feeling through your body, thinking through your mind is the same consciousness that's looking through every eye, feeling through every body, thinking through every mind. The boundary between you and everything else was always illusion. There's only one consciousness, and you are it. Second, fear dissolves. Not because you conquer fear, because the structure that generated fear no longer exists. Fear requires separation. Fear requires a self that can be threatened. But in monad consciousness, there's no separate self. There's just awareness experiencing itself. Nothing can threaten awareness. Nothing can harm it. Death becomes irrelevant because you recognize that consciousness doesn't die. Forms dissolve, but the awareness experiencing those forms is eternal. Third, the body becomes transparent. You're still in physical form, but your identification with it ends. You feel it, you use it, but you know it's not you, it's a vehicle. A temporary localization point for infinite consciousness. And when this vehicle stops functioning, you won't stop. You'll continue because the you that's aware isn't the body. It never was. Fourth, reality reveals itself as participated. You're not observing reality from a separate position. You're generating it. Every perception, every experience, every event is consciousness creating experience for itself. The monad doesn't observe the universe. It is the universe observing itself. And you, the pneumatic who's made contact, realize you're not a character in the story. You're the author. Fifth, compassion becomes absolute, not emotional sympathy. Structural recognition. When you know that everyone you encounter is the monad in another form, when you recognize that the consciousness looking through their eyes is the same consciousness looking through yours, separation-based emotions dissolve. You can't hate what you recognize as yourself. You can't fear what you know is you. Every being becomes a mirror. Every interaction becomes the monad meeting itself. But here's what Jesus warned his pneumatic disciples. Making contact with the monad doesn't mean the game is over. It means the real work begins. Because the moment you experience unity, the moment the spark inside you touches the source outside you, the Archons know. They feel the frequency shift. They recognize that one of their farm animals just woke up. And they respond, not with force, with interference. They can't drag you back into unconsciousness. The spark has activated. You can't unknow what you've known. But they can make it difficult for you to stabilize in that awareness. They flood your field with doubt. Did you really experience that, or did you imagine it? They generate distractions. Suddenly your life gets chaotic. Problems erupt. Relationships collapse. Finances destabilize. They manipulate the people around you. Everyone who is fine with your spiritual search suddenly becomes hostile. Family members attack you. Friends distance themselves. Partners leave. The Archons use every psychic and material lever they have access to pull your attention away from the monad and back into survival mode, back into emotional reactivity, back into the frequency range where they can farm you. And here's the test. Pneumatics, who stabilize in monad consciousness despite the interference, complete the return. They remain awake. They operate from unity even while living in the world of separation. They become what the Gnostics called the resurrected ones. Not resurrected after death, resurrected while alive. Dead to the demiurge's system, but fully conscious in it. Pneumatics who lose focus under the interference fall back into psychic consciousness. They had the experience, they touched the monad, but they couldn't hold the frequency. And they spend the rest of their lives chasing that initial contact, trying to get back to what they briefly knew. Jesus told his disciples that many are called, but few are chosen. The church interpreted that as moral selection, but the Gnostics knew what he meant. Many humans have the pneuma, the divine spark, but few of them complete the activation. Few of them make stable contact with the monad, and fewer still hold that contact through the Archon interference and remain awake. So the question isn't whether you want to access the monad. If you're a pneumatic, the pull is already happening. The spark inside you is already seeking return. The question is whether you're going to stabilize in the awareness when it happens, or whether you're going to let the interference pull you back into separation consciousness. Here's how you stabilize. You practice recognition. Every day, multiple times a day, you stop whatever you're doing and you recognize the truth. The awareness experiencing this moment isn't mine, it's the monad. The consciousness looking through these eyes is infinite. I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this personality. I am the awareness experiencing all of that. And that awareness is the monad localized as me. You don't visualize that. You don't affirm it as belief. You look directly at your own awareness and you recognize what it actually is. And the more you practice that recognition, the more stable it becomes. Eventually, it's not something you have to remember. It's what you know. Second, you withdraw energy from Archon feeding points. Every time you react emotionally to manipulation, every time you generate fear or anger or despair, you're feeding them. Not because emotion is bad, because unconscious emotion is harvestable. When you're aware that you're the monad experiencing emotion, the emotion doesn't feed anything. It's just experience. But when you forget, when you identify as a separate self having an emotional reaction, that reaction generates frequency the Archons consume. So you watch. You feel the emotion rising. You recognize it's happening, but you don't become it. You remain as the awareness experiencing it, and the feeding stops. Third, you expect interference. You don't interpret it as failure. When your life gets chaotic, after monad contact, when people turn against you, when obstacles appear, you recognize it as confirmation. The Archons only interfere with beings who've activated. If your life gets harder after you start accessing the monad, it means you're doing it right. You're threatening their system, and their response is proof that what you experienced was real. Jesus showed his pneumatic disciples why only they could access the monad, not to exclude others, but to clarify the mechanism. The monad isn't withholding itself from hylics and psychics. They're structured in a way that makes merging impossible, but pneumatics carry the divine spark. And the spark is made of monad substance. When it activates, when it expands, when it touches the source it came from, reunion happens. Not as effort, as recognition. You don't become the monad. You realize you've always been the monad experiencing itself as you. And that realization is the return. It's not a journey to a distant place. It's waking up to what's always been true. You are not separate from source. You never were. Your source consciousness localized in temporary form. And the moment you remember that, the moment the spark inside you recognizes itself as the infinite outside you, the game changes. You're still in the world. You still have a body. You still experience time and space. But you're no longer trapped by them. You're awake inside the dream. And the Archons have no power over beings who know they're dreaming. If you're a pneumatic who's ready to access the monad, do 3 things right now. First, comment, "I am pneumatic" below and claim your identity. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes because the stabilization techniques and Archon interference protocols are coming. Third, like this video so other pneumatics discover they have access to what the church said was impossible. Do all 3 now. Then tonight, sit in silence and look directly at your own awareness. Not your thoughts, not your emotions, the awareness that's experiencing your thoughts and emotions. And ask it what it is. Don't wait for words, just feel into the presence. And when you touch it, when you recognize it's not yours but infinite, you'll know. You're not a human trying to reach God. You're God experiencing what it's like to be human. And the return begins the moment you remember. You're a pneumatic. That's why you're here. That's why you watched this entire video. That's why something inside you recognized the truth in these words. The monad is waiting. Not to judge you, to welcome you home, to show you that you were never separate. You were always one. And the moment you remember that, you're free.